So, you want to buy a car, or it's time to change your old car to a new one. And you've been watching YouTube videos for inspiration and reference on what car to change to. But wait a minute, YouTube car reviews are all of new cars, and new cars are crazy expensive here in Singapore right now. 160k for Honda Vezel, 170k for Kia Niro, and $200,000 for Volkswagen Tiguan. Man, how to afford? So the next best alternative is to get a used car. Well, they are still expensive, but at least you can put down a 50k down payment and finance the rest. So now back to the question, what car should you buy? So if you've watched my previous videos, right, you know that I put up a lot of content on EVs, or rather BEVs or battery EVs, and specifically on new models. But in this video, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I won't be talking about BEVs. Instead, we will be discussing about hybrid EVs or HEVs and internal combustion engine or ICE cars. Yes, no more BYDs or Tesla for now. Now, cars in Singapore are crazy expensive right now. Today's COE alone, right, can buy you a new car just 10 years ago. So really, buying a brand new car for most of us, well, that's a luxury dream. So for many of us, right, if you cannot take the public transport, Grab is so expensive and car sharing is not really an option, right? The most realistic alternative we have today is to get a used car. But here's the next problem. There are just too many used car choices on the market right now. Electric, petrol, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, mild hybrid. Let's be real. Most Singaporeans will still end up deciding between the two main types, a hybrid EV or traditional ICE cars. Yes, I know, me, an EV advocate, not talking about battery EVs. Well, the reality is there aren't a lot of used BEVs in the market currently. So in this video, right, we'll be diving into just the options of HEVs and ICE cars. Now, I'm not promoting any particular brand, and the cars I'm using in these videos, right, which are the cars behind me currently, are just going to be examples of the two types of vehicles. So take it that this video is a first for me in not mentioning about battery EVs. Oh, and also what this video is for another first is our sponsor, Hong Leong Assurance. Now, more on them later. Now, what's the difference between a hybrid and a petrol car? Well, a petrol car, also known as an internal combustion engine or ICE car, runs purely on petrol. You pump petrol at a petrol station, you drive, and the engine burns fuel to power the car. Every driver will be familiar with this type of car. A hybrid car, though being available here for decades already, is still a little bit less known. Now, hybrids have two power sources, a petrol engine and an electric motor. Yes, it's the same electric motor as the one in a BEV. Now, the hybrid car switches between them or sometimes uses both of them at the same time, depending on how you drive. And yes, in a hybrid EV, there is a battery, like in a battery EV. But this battery is much smaller, good for maybe 10 to 40 kilometers of electric drive only. One more fact, in Singapore, most hybrids are self-charging, which means you don't plug them in to charge. The batteries recharge on their own, or you drive or brake. Interestingly, there is another type of hybrid in the form of Nissan's e-powered cars. These are motor-driven, and although there is a petrol-fed engine, it doesn't directly drive the wheels. The engine is used to either drive the motor or charge the batteries. So technically, Nissan e-power cars drive much more like a Tesla or BYD battery EV. Separately, there is another variant of HEV called a plug-in hybrid EV or PHEV. such as the new BYD Sea Lion 6 DMI. Now, these PHEVs still have an engine and a motor and of course batteries, but they can be plugged in to charge like a pure battery EV too. So in the real world, right, these PHEVs are the true hybrids in which you really have the best of both worlds. Now, but in this video, I'm just referring to the vanilla HEVs, those hybrids from Toyota or Honda that you're seeing everywhere, including this 2021 Hyundai Tucson hybrid that you see here. And for comparison, right, I'm using my own Petrol Peugeot 5008. Now, this is a simple petrol car with a 1.6 litre turbocharged engine mated to an automatic gearbox driving the two front wheels, just like, well, what cars have been for the past 80 years. Now, before I go into the considerations of which is a better choice for you, right, help me with liking this video first, okay? Now, it's a departure from what I normally do, and I wish to gauge if you like this type of content. Now, after all, we always only find new car reviews on YouTube. So there are extremely few videos dedicated to sharing real-world advice from real owners on what used car to get. And do subscribe too, so that you will not miss out on the next video, which can be an episode where more practical topics are discussed, okay? Done? Well, let me share 5 real-world and very important considerations between choosing to own a hybrid versus a petrol car here in Singapore. First point for comparison, insurance premium. Now, some people still think that insurers are charging higher premiums for hybrids. Well, that was true when hybrids were first introduced into the market because insurance companies, right, they didn't know how to price their premiums as there weren't enough HEVs on the roads at that time. But hybrids are everywhere now, and while parts and repairs might be a little pricier, insurance premiums remain largely similar to those of ICE cars. I'll let you see for yourself. Let me try to put in a quote for the Hyundai Tucson hybrid I have with me. So for instance, right, we find the premium from HLAS, which is at $1,003. Now let's try the same for my Peugeot 5008. Well, the premium comes out to be exactly the same at $1,003. But wait, if we click into HLAS page, enter my particulars in more details, I get a more competitive quote of $999. There seems to be no difference for HEVs and ICE cars. By the way, thanks to Hong Leong Assurance for sponsoring this video. Now, I'm sure you have also heard of Hong Leong Assurance, or HLAS as they are called here, because they have established themselves to be a trusted insurer. What they are known for in their motor insurance is that they cover all authorized drivers, named and even unnamed, with the same excess, so long as the authorized driver is 27 years old or older and have 2 years of driving experience. Now, this is good news for my lead videographer who always wanted to drive this car around for shoots but couldn't because he wasn't named in my current policy. Now, also, their NCD Protector covers drivers with 30% NCD, unlike many others who only covers at 50%. But here's the best thing for you. Now, if you are not an existing HLAS car insurance policy holder, right, get a quote through the QR code here or by the link that you see in the description below, and you are entitled to 25% discount in your premium, plus a free car servicing. Now, terms apply, of course, but this is a darn good deal. Perhaps I should get my insurance from them when this car is due for renewal later. Anyway, I wonder, will the situation be the same for BEVs, as in will insurance premiums drop when more EVs are on the road in the years to come? Now, in practice, I believe it surely will, after speaking to some insurers that I know. It's a matter of calculated risk for the insurers. With more data, the quotes will become lower. Now, in fact, there is a possibility that BEVs premiums might become lower than that of HEVs, since there are lesser parts to insure and BEVs have a lot more safety features. Anyway, I digress. Now let's move on to the second contention, which is price and resale value. Now generally, petrol cars cost the least simply because they are the simplest to build, even though they have more parts than BEVs. That's because engines and gearboxes have existed for so long now that they don't cost as much as they used to, say compared to 3 to 4 decades ago. So you might think that for the same reason, BEVs will be costlier than ICE cars because batteries are expensive. Well, you're not wrong. But what happens if we insert a HEV in the comparison? Generally, HEVs slot in between the prices of an ICE car and a BEV. But in Singapore and some other markets, right, the government's intervention makes BEVs cheaper than HEVs. I don't have many direct examples, but here's one from Hyundai. Now, they are the only brand that sells the Kona Hybrid and the Kona Electric. And the BEV version is 5K cheaper in its list price, even though the hybrid's OMV, or original cost, right, is $25,000, while the electric version costs $34,000. So the hybrid car cost is $9,000 cheaper, yet the list price is 5K more? This is because of our government's additional rebate for BEVs. But again, I digress. Now, comparatively, right, HEVs would definitely cost more than a petrol equivalent. Again, the only example I can find is from Honda, specifically from the authorized dealer, Car Moto here. Now, their Resale, or HRV as it is called locally, is $168,000 for the petrol version and $201,000 for the hybrid version. Now, don't ask me why the price disparity is so much. I'm just listing this from SG Carmart. Then we go on to their resale price. Again, this is not a scientific comparison, and I'll just use what I can find on SG Carmart to help you compare. I'll be using the same Car Moto's Honda HRV Petrol and the hybrid for the comparison. And to substantiate my point, right, I've added another pair of vessels, one of which is a petrol and the other a hybrid. Now, let's take a look at the HRVs first. Now, on the left is the petrol DX version, and on the right is the HX HEV version. Now you can see that while both are around 1 month old apart, the asking price of the hybrid is only $1,000 more. But if we go to take a look at their OMV and COE figures, we see an interesting observation. Despite the hybrid version costing $8,000 more in its COE and $6,000 more in its OMV, the resale value is actually lower. To substantiate this observation, we take a look at two PI vessels. Same thing, petrol on the left and hybrid on the right. Now again, being 1 day apart only, right, the hybrid actually is priced lower even though its COE is $12,000 more and the OMV is 4K higher. Why is this so? Well, this is due to the rebates that were given up front when the car was bought. Those upfront rebates would be clawed back when the car is deregistered. So for this type of comparison, right, it's better to compare the annual depreciation, especially if you are driving the car until its 10th year mark. Then, as a used car buyer, right, the new car owner before you would have absorbed the higher loss for this hybrid car. But there's a big caveat in this whole equation, which is our government's green plan in banning ICE car sales from 2030 and ICE car ownership altogether from 2040 onwards. Now that means logically, ICE cars will be much less in demand come 2030, and rightfully right, ICE cars value would likely drop. Well, unless you are getting a rare ICE model like the Nissan GTR, which would probably become a collector's car. So if you intend to buy a newish petrol car today and sell it near or just after 2030, but before it is due for scrap, right, you will likely see its value drop faster than a hybrid. Third consideration, fuel efficiency. Now, petrol cars are not very fuel efficient. Hybrids though, like the extremely popular Honda Shuttle, Resale and Freed, and over at Toyota, the Corolla, Sienna, and even the bigger MPVs like the Noah, get fuel efficiency figures of at least 16 up to 22 kilometers per liter in real life. Now, for this particular 4-year-old Tucson, right, I'm clocking a real-world FC figure of around 21 to 23 kilometers per liter when I drove this car for around an hour in a mix of expressways, jam, and smaller roads. Well, it sounds like a good fuel consumption, right? Well, it is. In fact, I have heard of FC figures of like 30 kilometers per liter in smaller hybrids like the Honda Fit. But I don't think that is an expectable figure for most HEV owners. Well, what about petrol cars then? I've owned 16 petrol cars in my lifetime, including this Peugeot 5008, which I bought used. So I have experienced a huge range of fuel efficiency, ranging from my Kia Picanto, which could easily top 20 kilometers per liter. Now, my Honda Fit has to be the one which clocks the second best efficiency, as the average consumption was 16 to 18 kilometers per liter. Ironically, my Mercedes CLA 180 could be the third best, with readings of around 14 to 16 kilometers per liter. And conversely, right, the worst ever was my BMW 730, which could barely get me 6 to at best 8 clicks per liter. And among the other worst cars were my Honda Odyssey, Mitsubishi Grandis, and Mercedes GLC Coupe, which at best can get me 8 to 10 clicks per liter. Now, the other ICE cars that I've owned, ranging from the Hyundai Elantra, Honda Civic, the VW EOS that I absolutely love, and of course, this Peugeot 5008, right? Well, they have fuel consumption figures of between 10 to 12 kilometers per liter. And specifically, when I drove this car for around an hour in the same fashion as the Tucson hybrid, right? Well, I only got a FC figure of around 10 kilometers per liter, which is rather typical for a petrol car. So clearly, if you drive a lot, especially in stop and go, expressway jams, and city traffic, right? A hybrid car makes a lot more sense for you. Now, off the cuff, right, in a 10 kilometer per liter car like my Peugeot, your monthly petrol bill could average to be around $380 after discount. And assuming that you clock 20,000 kilometers a year and you are pumping 95 octane petrol. In a hybrid, you could be saving 50% of that amount, which could be more than $2,000 a year. Moving on to the fourth comparison, maintenance and reliability. Now, obviously, having been around for decades, right, ICE cars are generally easier and cheaper to service, especially when you are getting from mass market Japanese and Korean brands. Mechanics everywhere are familiar with servicing and maintaining many ICE car models. Parts are widely available and there's less uncertainty. So if there are no major hiccups, right, you're looking at maybe a bill of between $120 to $200 per regular servicing. And even with needing to change parts from the engine bay, right, like filters, hoses, belts, or gaskets, the damage will be manageable. But for hybrids, right, the best of both worlds is also the worst of both worlds. Whatever worries you have in a BEV, right, you will likely face them in hybrids too. Now, don't forget, in addition to everything that you find in a normal petrol car, you have another electric motor, an inverter, and the worst perceived nightmares of BEVs, right, the battery pack also. So yes, the engine bay can look extremely complex. And it's not uncommon that HEVs, because of the added weight, they need more frequent brake pads and tire changes than their petrol cousins. But the good news is, in terms of maintenance, the costs are roughly similar because the motor and the batteries normally don't need servicing or change of parts. Well, maybe the batteries in a much longer term, which I'll talk more about next. Still, overall, with fewer parts, ICE cars are generally more reliable than hybrids. And if you intend to keep your car beyond the 10th birthday, right, this might be something that you want to be considering. Last point for contention, battery longevity. Now, this has been the big fear for hybrid car buyers. I say had been because that's what many naysayers say when the bulk of hybrids are introduced some 10 to 12 years ago. They said the battery will cost tens of thousands of dollars to replace if it breaks down, and it won't last 5 years. In fact, I distinctly remember a guy telling me that he would never touch a hybrid because the batteries will die in 3 years. But look at hybrid cars today, specifically those that have been in the market for 10 or more years now. Even so many of our PHVs are hybrids. Why? Because battery packs have been proven to last 8 to 10 years. And I've spoken to HEV owners, right? They tell me that the reliability of their batteries, especially in their Honda Vezel, is still running okay even after 10 years of usage. And here today, after a decade of technological advancement, naysayers are still claiming that EV batteries won't last beyond 3 to 5 years. But still, an extra component in a car is still a potential additional headache. And in the unlikely case that the battery is really dead, right, you're looking at a hefty replacement cost, potentially from 2 to 5K depending on the car and the battery. Now, this figure is already a lot lower than what you have paid 10 years ago, which would cost you some 5K and up. Now, for petrol cars though, there's no such worry. There's only the 12-volt battery that you need to regularly change once in every 2 years or so for under $200. Fact, that 12-volt battery, right, exists in a hybrid also, okay? Like I said, worst of both worlds. Okay, I've covered 5 practical comparison points for your choice between a used hybrid and an ICE car. But honestly, right, like I keep saying in my previous episodes, buying a car is usually more of a heart consideration rather than a head consideration. So let me add on a 6th consideration that's going to be subjective. Now, I call this consideration emotional factors. Now, if you haven't owned a hybrid before, there's always that lingering worry of what if the battery dies and how much will it cost to replace? Though for some others, right, they are willing to pay that price of peace of mind, knowing that they will be burning less fuel, doing their part for the environment, and enjoying a smoother, quieter drive. But then again, right, petrol cars give you a different type of peace. The kind that comes from familiar grounds. Any workshop will know how to tend to petrol cars. Parts are everywhere and there are no tech headaches. But owning a hybrid feels like you are moving forward, like you are driving the future, even though it is not fully electric, and like it is a step towards owning a battery EV. And if you get one of those Nissan e-powered cars or the BYD Sea Lion 6, right, it is as good as owning a battery EV without any range anxiety from the batteries. But ICE cars give you something else intangible, like control or connectedness to the road. It's a feeling that pure ICE car owners swear by that battery EVs, even hybrid EVs, cannot translate to. It's about that instant connection to the revs, the hum of the engine, the raw and mechanical feel. Again, right, this is highly subjective. And let's not forget about the perception of how you think others will view you, even though in reality, right, no one really cares. Now, some people will see hybrids as smart and progressive, so they think their friends will see them as sophisticated and mindful. But others, right, would think that they are overhyped, fragile, or even boring. And some drivers today would still carry the image of freedom, power, and dependability in the ICE cars that they drive, even if they are not as efficient. And HEVs and BEVs have more than caught up in all these aspects. So, like I said, right, this is subjective and only you will know which is best for you. At the end of the day, it's about what kind of driver you are. Now, if you love driving, the ICE car could be a better choice. But if you want a quieter, more efficient ride, hybrids would make you happier. Now, I heard someone said this before, but in a different context. You're choosing between the known and the next. So, ICE or hybrid? Now, to be honest, right, there's no clear winner here. And I believe that's exactly the point. If you do a lot of city driving, you are fuel conscious and you are planning to hold your car for the next 5 to 7 years, well, a used hybrid might actually make a lot more sense to you. But if you want something straightforward, fast-free and cheaper to maintain in the short term, right, especially if you're only planning to keep the car for a couple of years, then perhaps a used ICE car is still a solid bet. Either way, you're not just buying a car, you're choosing a lifestyle. Just make sure that this lifestyle fits your road ahead. Now let me know in the comments below, which will you choose? The hybrid, the ICE, or even the battery EV? Now I read all the comments, though I might take some time to reply to you. And honestly, right, sharing your experience might help other people watching this video to decide too. Well, in any case, my name is Colin, and let me know if you'd like me to touch on these topics in future videos. Topics that you don't easily find elsewhere on YouTube. Again, like this video if you haven't, and subscribe to my channel, okay? I'll see you in the next one.